Hello everyone, my name is Felicity. I'm a mother, a widow, and for most of my life, I believed that sacrifice would always be repaid with love. But one night proved me wrong. My son gave his father-in-law a BMW with a red bow. To me he handed $5. That was the moment my world cracked open. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what you would have done if you were me. The bow was the kind of red that photographs well, high gloss, ridiculous, shameless. It sat on the hood like a crown, stealing the light from the chandeliers and the oxygen from my chest. Everyone at the Donnellys' winter party had their phones up, capturing my son's big cinematic gesture. A gleaming BMW, idling in the driveway like a silver secret freshly confessed. He'd kept it quiet for weeks, Arya said. She smiled for the camera and slid her arm around her father's shoulders while the whole patio counted down. 10, 9, 8. I stood behind a row of boxwooden faces, a black coat and a black night. I counted the crystal flutes instead, because numbers soothe you when people don't. 34 on the table by the ice sculpture, 6 more on the bar. The kind of party where napkins had a monogram, and the napkins had their own napkins. The kind of party where you, if you are me, become part of the furniture. Ready? Liam called, his voice bright as the bow. My son. My only child. The boy I once walked to school under an umbrella big enough to cover both our lives. His tie was winter blue, the exact color he used to choose when I let him pick crayons in the grocery store aisle, because a box of crayons felt like proof that tomorrow existed. 3, 2, 1. Surprise, Patrick, he shouted, yanking the cover free. The guests exploded. Arya's father laughed in a way that made heads turn. That laugh people save for golf wins and IPOs. Cameras flashed. The bow glowed. The valet clapped. Somewhere a woman said, "Oh my God, he's so good to you," in a tone you use for saints and sons who marry well. I kept smiling, because smiling is the last polite thing a woman can do before she disappears. I slid my hands deeper into my gloves. I told myself to be happy for a car that was not mine, bought with money that was not mine, for a man who was not mine. Patrick Donnelly kissed Liam's cheek. You didn't have to, he boomed. Men like him always say that as if they didn't draw a map to this exact moment. Come see the interior, Liam said, and their bodies moved as one cheerful tide toward the driver's door. Arya caught my eye. Mom, isn't it perfect? She asked, breathless. She'd started calling me Mom after the wedding, tasting the word like a promise. Lately it sat on her tongue like candy she'd outgrown. It's very thoughtful, I said. The words felt like dry crackers in my mouth. That's when Liam turned back to me, as if remembering an errand. Oh, he said, patting his jacket. Almost forgot. He reached into the inner pocket and pulled out a little envelope. People say you can hear your own blood when things get bad enough. It sounds like a faucet someone didn't quite turn off. For you, he said, with a boyish flourish that used to be charming. A little something. I took the envelope. It was thin and warm from his body. I opened it with my thumb. Inside were 5 single bills, folded together like strangers in a fast train. The kind of cash you slide to a valet when you're out of bigger gestures. The kind you give a child for the candy machine if you don't want to fish for quarters. Get yourself a ride home, he said softly, almost sheepish. Or something. There are many words I could have said in that second. I could have told him how I once rode a bus through a blizzard to bring him antibiotic syrup, because his fever wouldn't break and the clinic was closing. I could have told him about a night I promised a landlord the rent was coming, and then worked 2 extra shifts so the promise would be true. I could have told him that when he was born, a nurse put him on my chest and the whole room turned red as a bow, and I thought, I will love you without a bottom. Instead I said, thank you, love. And I tucked the $5 into my coat pocket so that I would not drop them with the rest of myself. He was already turning away, already back in the orbit of the car and the cheers and the man who mattered. The difference between a mother and a father-in-law is not a ledger line, it is an ocean. And oceans don't argue with boats. Music swelled from the speakers, something bright and expensive. A waiter floated by with a tray of little spoons filled with something that looked like applause. People in coats put their hands on my elbow the way you touch a mannequin to test the fabric. Felicity, so lovely you could make it, they said, in voices that were practiced at Lovely. I stood there and let the cold step through me. When you spend years teaching yourself to be grateful for crumbs, you forget how to be hungry. You forget hunger is sacred. You forget it's the first prayer. Come on, let's get a picture with everyone, Arya called. Mom, you too. I stepped into the cluster of bodies, the shape a family makes when it wants to look like a family. I found a corner of the frame far from the bow. The photographer crouched. Rose clicked, coaxed. Closer, she said. Hands on shoulders. Big smiles. Liam slid an arm around Arya's waist and beamed with every tooth he owns. Patrick lifted the key fob, his thumb on the emblem as if pressing it might print his name across the sky. I lifted my chin a fraction and thought about the $5 warming my pocket. The camera word. Perfect, the photographer said, which is a word for things that don't have mothers. Inside the Donnellys' house, heat wrapped the air in expensive sweetness, cinnamon, cloves, pine, and money. The foyer was a tall mouth swallowing coats and compliments. I drifted to the edge of the living room and found a quiet place behind a pillar, a talent I have honed. A pianist in the corner stroked the edges of familiar songs until they belonged to no one. Men talked about market headwinds like weather. Women compared foundation shades like flags. Felicity, someone chimed near my shoulder. It was Nina, one of Arya's friends, always kind in a way that cost her nothing. Did you see the car? Liam is such a giver. He is, I said, and my voice did not crack. Hooray for small victories that no one claps for. Do you need anything? I can get you a plate, she offered. Water, I said. I didn't trust myself with a knife and a piece of cake. She flitted off. I watched Liam from the pillar, the elegant tilt of his head when he listened to Patrick, the easy way he accepted back slaps and praise. The posture of a man who believed he had become himself on purpose. I willed my eyes to soften. The grief that rose in me wasn't simple. It never is. Love doesn't switch off. It only learns to speak in fewer rooms. Nina returned with a glass and a napkin, and a look that almost said I see you. Almost as a mercy on nights like this. Arya was telling me you do calligraphy, she chirped. I used to, I said. Before the shop closed. That's so artisanal. The word hovered like a moth and died between us. Oh, they're starting the toasts. Patrick clinked his glass with the confidence of a man who expects the sound to carry. To Liam, he announced, who has shown us all what generosity looks like. To family, to loyalty, to doing right by the people who raised you right. A small ripple ran through the room. Laughter, agreement. No one noticing that the sentence was missing a woman who once sold her wedding band to keep the lights on. The pianist softened the keys to make room for applause. Arya's mother dabbed the corner of her eye with the silk of someone who has never used a paper tissue twice. Liam took the floor then, clearing his throat. He spoke about opportunity and gratitude, and the Donnelly legacy with the crispness of a commencement speaker. He thanked mentors and partners and his second dad. And when the words second mom hovered on the air like a shy bird, he did not catch them. He glanced vaguely in my direction and nodded, the kind of nod you give to the stagehand who pulls the curtain. And then, because the night demanded a final flourish, he told a story about a winter when his car broke down and Patrick lent him an old sedan for 3 months while he found his footing. He didn't even ask for gas money, Liam said. Laughter, warm and balanced. That's the kind of man he is. Something inside me set down its glass. $5 can buy you a lottery ticket. $5 can buy you a bus ride. $5 can buy you the clean edge of a decision. I slipped away while the room was still clapping, easy as breath. Coat, scarf, gloves. Movements I'd practiced all my life. The art of leaving without causing a spill. In the foyer, a teenage girl wrestled a golden retriever into a Christmas sweater, and we both lost the battle at the same time. The dog shook himself free. The sweater flapped like a surrender flag. We laughed. For a second, I remembered that life is full of small, true silliness that can still find you even when you are breaking. Outside, the cold put its hands on my face like a mother who missed me. The BMW glowed beneath a string of lights, its bow unruffled, its mirrors reflecting dozens of tiny worlds where I didn't exist. I stepped past it, down the shallow steps to the circular drive, where valets in neat black gloves lined up lives and retrieved them on cue. My breath made little ghosts. I opened my purse for the valet, then remembered the $5 and closed it again. I'm good, I told him. It's a good night for a walk. It's a long road, he said, concerned. We can call you a car. $5, I considered. I pictured the driver's eyes in the rear view, the chatter of a kind stranger, the way it might undo me. The air will help, I said, and began down the lane. The Donnelly house fell behind me as if it had never been mine to enter. The night sound changed, first from party noise to palm against door hush, and then to the subtle orchestra of winter. The crinkle of frost on grass, the tiny cracking of puddles becoming glass, the wingbeat of a bird that doesn't migrate. I walked until the music was just a glitter in the trees, and the only light was the soft insistence of the moon. Lonely is a word people throw around like rice at a wedding. What I felt was not lonely. What I felt was a room inside me getting quiet enough to hear the truth sit down. At the end of the road, there's a small overlook where the neighborhood gives up pretending it is a village, and admits it is only a hill. The city below looked like a map of someone else's decisions. I leaned on the stone wall and took out my phone. The screen opened to a recent photo Liam had sent last week. Arya in a red dress, both of them laughing, both of them so beautiful they seemed safe from consequence. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Then I did the most mother thing I've ever done. I saved the photo. I locked the screen. And I blocked my son. First the calls. A tap and a hollow relief. Then the messages. A confirmation bubble that felt like a held breath. Then the social accounts. One by one, the lights going out in windows I had stood under in the rain for years. The phone asked me twice if I was sure. Yes. Yes, I am sure. I am sure I am done holding a door for someone who has already moved to a different house. When I finished, the screen was a dark square in my palm. A small mirror that would finally stop telling me stories I couldn't live in. I slipped it back into my coat and turned toward the main road. The air sharpened my lungs. If grief is heat, dignity is cold. It keeps the edges from slumping. On the walk home, I passed the bakery where I bought Liam's 9th birthday cake with quarters, because a whisper in my head said boys remember cakes. I passed the closed travel agency with sun-faded posters from countries that have no word for $5. I passed the laundromat where I once accidentally washed a 20 with his Little League socks, and taped the pieces together like a tiny, papery heart. At my building, the lobby was quiet. The night porter looked up from his crossword, and gave me the nod we reserve for people who keep their storms indoors. I climbed the stairs because elevators are for heavy things and I wanted to be light. Inside my apartment, the radiator hissed a greeting, alive and old and stubborn like me. I hung my coat, set my purse on the entry table, and took out the envelope. I unfolded the bills and laid them flat with my thumb. They looked braver that way. I opened a drawer and placed them between 2 sheets of stationery I'd saved for letters that never needed writing. The phone on the kitchen counter buzzed once. The kind of buzz a device makes when it's trying not to wake you but cannot help itself. A number I didn't recognize lit the screen. It wasn't Liam, it wasn't Arya. I let it buzz again and then again, 3 evenly spaced heartbeats. I told myself I'd ignore it. I poured water. I watched the glass fill, clear to the rim. But the 4th buzz came with a voicemail, and the voicemail came with a transcription preview. And transcriptions do not care about the narratives you have planned for yourself. Felicity. It began, the name careful. This is Harriet Lang, from Lang & Coyle we met years ago at. Well, never mind, I'm calling because something has come across my desk with your name on it, and I think you should see it before anyone else does. Please call me as soon as you can. I set the glass down carefully. The water trembled the way a lake does just before it decides what kind of story it will be. Outside, far away, a cheer rose up and spilled into the dark. The party toasting itself, a bow gleaming, a man squeezing a fob. Inside, a different sound took shape. Paper settling in a drawer. Heat breathing in pipes. The word before hanging in the air like a promise that isn't sure whether to keep you safe or set you on fire. I picked up the phone. I looked at the blocked list. I looked at Harriet Lang. And for the first time that night I smiled, small but entirely mine. Tomorrow, I said to the empty room. Tomorrow morning I'll call. I did not sleep that night. The radiator whispered like an old friend who couldn't bear to leave me alone. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw the bow again, red and merciless, glowing in the cold. When the morning light slipped through the blinds, I didn't reach for my phone to call Harriet Lang. Instead, I made tea the way my father used to, strong, dark, with a slice of lemon that cuts through bitterness without asking permission. The first sip always pulls me backward. My father was not a rich man in the way the Donnellys are rich, but he believed wealth was not measured in applause. He built small things. A hardware shop on the corner, 3 modest rental homes. A parcel of land he refused to sell even when neighbors laughed at him. Land doesn't shout, he told me once, but it remembers you. When he passed, I inherited it all. Not a fortune that makes headlines, but a foundation that makes a life steady. And when Liam came along, small and loud and miraculous, I swore every board, every brick, every dollar would be bent toward him. I can still see myself at 29, standing in the bursar's office of his university, handing over a cashier's check from the sale of one of those rental homes. The clerk said, "This is a generous payment, ma'am," and I smiled as if generosity was a choice and not the only way forward. I paid for his tuition before he even saw the bills. I bought him books before syllabi were printed. I packed him lunches when he was too proud to be seen carrying them, then wired him grocery money, so he could pretend independence tasted like cereal at midnight. When he dreamed of starting a business, I mortgaged another property to buy him time. When his first office lease looked too ambitious, I signed the guarantor line with a hand that shook but never wavered. He stood in the photo for that ribbon cutting, beaming, scissors in hand. I stood in the back row, clapping until my palms burned. I gave him my father's legacy piece by piece, gift by gift. Not to make him grateful, but to make him safe. Because that is what mothers do. We lay our bones down to be the floor our children walk on. But safety is a strange thing. When it works, they forget the floor is even there, and when it breaks, you realize you built a palace of comfort with your own name scratched out at the gates. The voicemail from Harriet Lang lingered in my phone like an unopened letter. For 2 days I let it breathe, walking past the kitchen counter, as if the phone were a stranger waiting in my hallway. On the 3rd morning, I dialed. "Felicity." Harriet's voice was crisp but warm. "I thought you'd never call. We need to meet. It's time we update your will. And there's another matter. Something your son and his wife don't yet know." Her words felt like an invitation into a room I'd forgotten I owned. We met at her office, a place that smelled of old leather and newer secrets. She laid out the papers. The deed still in my name, the accounts untouched, the villa by the sea my father left me. The villa I had once handed over to Liam and Arya as a gift for their summer getaways. "They assume it's theirs?" Harriet asked, raising an eyebrow. "They do more than assume," I said. "They parade their friends through it, fill it with furniture I never chose, act as if I am just a guest." Harriet's pen hovered. "Then we make it clear. It is yours. And it can be sold." I signed. The pen did not tremble this time. The villa had always been my father's pride. A modest white house with blue shutters that caught the salt air like a song. When he died, I could not bear to stay there alone, so I handed the keys to Liam and told him to make memories. I told myself that was generosity. Now I saw it was erasure. The realtor moved quickly. Within a week, the villa was listed, and an eager buyer appeared. Cash offer. No fuss. Done. And then came the part one had been waiting for. The movers I hired were efficient, unsentimental. They stripped the villa room by room. Aria's curated couches, Liam's golf sets, the kitchen gadgets they bragged about online. Every last piece of it was packed into crates and delivered to the city. To their address. I didn't warn them. I didn't even call. I imagined the scene as clearly as if I were there. The moving truck idling in front of their glass-paneled townhouse, the driver ringing the bell, Liam opening the door in weekend clothes, Arya hovering behind him with coffee in hand. And then box after box, chair after chair, a sofa wrapped in plastic, lamps, rugs, even the framed photographs they had hung on villa walls. All of it carried into the daylight and stacked neatly on their doorstep. When the final crate was lowered with a thud, the driver handed Liam a clipboard. "Delivery for you, sir," he said. Liam's face would have drained of color. Aria's lips would have parted, searching for a protest that refused to arrive. Neighbors passing by would have slowed, whispering, watching the wealthy couple suddenly look very small in front of their own home. And somewhere far away, I sat in my armchair, sipping tea, knowing the villa was no longer theirs to flaunt. It was mine. And now it was gone, turned into money that would never touch their hands. By sunset, my phone buzzed with frantic calls. I didn't answer. Not Liam, not Arya. The sight of their names flashing on the screen filled me with a calm I hadn't felt in years. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was the woman who smiled at $5. But now, standing on the bones of my father's wisdom, I had just reminded them whose name was written on the deeds. And I had only begun. When you remove a crown from someone's head, you don't need to shout about it. The silence will do the work for you. After the villa's furniture was piled on Liam and Arya's doorstep, the neighborhood spoke louder than I ever could. In places like theirs, reputation is currency. And overnight, theirs was devalued. The first week, they called every day. Liam's voice on voicemail was clipped, trying to sound firm. But underneath it was the whine of a boy who'd lost his favorite toy. Mom, we need to talk. This isn't how family handles things. Family. A word he had twisted until it no longer resembled the thing my father built. Arya's messages were sharper. How could you embarrass us like that? Everyone saw. Do you realize what people are saying? I didn't respond. My silence was a wall they could not climb. It reached me through friends of friends, through whispers in cafes and the edges of church steps. They thought it was their villa, can you believe it? Apparently it was never signed over to them. Imagine all that furniture dumped right at their front door. The Donnellys, once untouchable in their glittering circle, now had a shadow trailing them into every room. Arya's mother was furious. Her carefully curated image of power cracked. Patrick, the man who had once wrapped his arm around my son like a prize, stopped inviting them to golf outings. The bow on the BMW didn't look so red anymore. While they scrambled to patch holes in their story, I sat with Harriet in her office again. We finalized my updated will. Every line was deliberate, every word a stone placed carefully. Are you sure? Harriet asked. You're cutting him out entirely? Yes, I said. He gave me $5 as if that was my worth. Now I'll show him what I truly hold. We shifted the assets. The sale of the villa, the accounts, the land my father left me. Not toward Liam. Not toward Arya. Toward charities, scholarships, and one or two people who had stood beside me without applause. The ink dried. My heart steadied. One evening, as I returned from the market, I found them waiting outside my building. Liam in a pressed shirt, Arya in sunglasses that couldn't hide the fury on her face. Mom, please, Liam started, stepping forward. This has gone too far. Arya crossed her arms. You humiliated us. Do you know what this is doing to our reputation? I unlocked the building door, stone. It was never your villa. And reputation cannot be repossessed, can it? Their mouths opened, closed. Neighbors paused to watch. I walked inside without looking back. The next week, I heard Patrick had stopped mentioning Liam in business meetings. Arya's invitations to luncheons were lost. Even their closest friends grew cold. And me? I slept well. For the first time in years, I felt my father's voice steady inside me. Land remembers. Dignity remembers. Silence speaks. I was not done yet. The BMW still gleamed in their driveway, a monument to arrogance. And I had one final move left. I waited for the right moment. Revenge, if done loudly, is just noise. But if done at the right time, in the right room, it becomes music that no one forgets. Arya's mother sent out invitations for a grand spring dinner. It was meant to repair their reputation. One last glittering attempt to prove they were still untouchable. The guest list was thick with names that mattered in their world. Business partners, socialites, the people whose whispers had teeth. I was surprised to find an invitation addressed to me. Perhaps they thought I would stay quiet for the sake of appearances. Perhaps they assumed I still needed a seat at their table. I went. Not to eat. Not to smile. But to end the performance. The dining room was dressed in gold and glass. Candelabras threw soft light across crystal goblets. At the head of the table sat Patrick, speaking loudly, trying to drown out the cracks in his empire. Beside him, Arya in her pale gown. And next to her, my son. Liam's smile looked thinner than I remembered, forced at the edges. Mom, he said when he saw me, as if the word might fix what he had broken. I sat 2 seats away, calm, hands folded in my lap. Midway through dinner, Patrick rose with his glass. To family, he said. To loyalty, and to a future built together. The irony was so sharp I nearly laughed. Aria's mother nodded approvingly. And then, to everyone's surprise, Patrick gestured toward me. And to Felicity, who has been a quiet supporter of all of us. We're glad to have you here tonight. The room clapped politely. I rose slowly, glass in hand. Thank you, I said, my voice carrying with the strength of silence long kept. But I should clarify something. The room quieted. Forks paused. Even the pianist at the far corner stilled his hands. The villa by the sea you all admired, it was never Liam's. It was mine. I sold it. A ripple of whispers, sharp and quick. And with the sale, along with the assets my father left me, I've secured something important. I pulled from my bag a folder Harriet had prepared. My will has been updated. None of my estate, none of my accounts, none of my properties will go to Liam or Aria. Gasps. Aria's hand shot to her mouth. Liam's face turned white. Instead, it will go toward scholarships for children who know what sacrifice means, and to the causes that build futures for people who work with their hands, like my father once did. Mom, Liam started, rising to his feet. Sit down, I said softly. And for the first time he obeyed me. Aria sputtered. You can't just. I already did, I replied. The silence that followed was louder than any applause. Guests stared at their plates, at their glasses, at anything but the Donnelly family. The gossip would travel faster than any of their cars. Patrick cleared his throat, muttered something about dessert. But the evening was already over. I placed my napkin on the table, stood, and walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one dared. Outside, the night air was cool, clean, almost forgiving. Behind me, I knew the whispers had already begun. About the mother who refused to be erased, about the son who thought $5 was enough, about the woman who took her dignity back and left the room standing taller than any of them. I smiled, small and steady. The bow on the BMW was long gone, the car just another object in a driveway. But the story of that night, the night I reminded them who I truly was, would never fade. And for the first time in years I felt free.